Hello and welcome. You're watching India Global. I'm Gaurie, Dwivedi, and this is an episode that is coming to you live from 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. Behind me is where the crucial meeting between Prime Minister Modi and US Vice President JD Vance is all set to begin in a couple of minutes. And through the course of the next 30 minutes, we'll keep giving you details, insights and perspective on what this meeting means and why it is so important. But first up, the headlines as always. US Vice President JD Vance is in India, all set to meet Prime Minister Modi in the next couple of minutes. On the agenda, trade, economic ties and deeper strategic ties between India and US. Pope Francis dies on Easter Monday at the age of 88. Pope's last message was that we were made for life, not death. Who will be the next Pope? The world awaits. China's big warning to countries signing trade pacts with the US. Beijing says that it will never accept it and will take countermeasures. The trade war between US and China continues to intensify. So the Easter ceasefire is over. Russia resumes fighting after the ceasefire. Ukraine says that Moscow breached the ceasefire nearly 3,000 times. Big story, JD Vance is in India. We are tracking all the developments closely, and in fact, if my camera person can show you, the meeting has just started. We can see the convoy of US Vice President JD Vance has just arrived for that all-important meeting with Prime Minister Modi. The next 45 minutes will be extremely important because it will pave the way for what could be the next steps, roadmap, vision as far as the India-US relationship is concerned. Before we get in our guest, let me quickly now put those big questions that we ask us always on India Global. First up, will JD Vance address India's concerns related to immigration? They have been amplified the last couple of weeks due to measures that the Trump administration has been taking against students and H-1Bs. Will that be addressed? Can that be addressed? That's the first question. Second up, will intel sharing now also be a key factor post the Havur Rana's extradition? Remember, a very successful extradition that took place after Prime Minister Modi and President Trump met. Will a follow-up mean closer intel sharing? Will terrorism be a key focus in these talks? So next up, will the 90-day tariff pause nearing an end? What's really at stake going forward? Can India balance the US market access demands with its own Make in India priorities? Remember, both sides are talking about America first, India first, Make in India. Where is that balance? Where is that fine line? What will be that give and take? Maybe this meeting will provide some answers. And lastly, can breakthroughs be expected when it comes to defense tech transfers, and how will this shape long-term regional security dynamics? A lot of ground to cover, as I said. Let me first get in Ambassador Arun Singh, who's been the ambassador of India to the US. Ambassador Singh, I'm going to keep coming back to you, but I want to keep reflecting the visuals that are happening behind me because the convoy of US Vice President JD Vance is right behind me, and all those black vehicles are nothing but the security, the US Secret Service security that is there ahead of the meeting that is in fact started, followed by the dinner that will take place. All right, Ambassador Singh, let me start with you, sir. First question I want to ask you is that this is an important meeting, a lot of ground to cover, a lot at stake. How do you view this meeting, and what would be your ideal takeaways from this?
I think what this meeting signals is that high-level engagement between India and the US is continuing. You would recall that the Indian Prime Minister was the fourth foreign leader invited by US President to visit the US. So that was one signal. The Indian Foreign Minister was among the invitees at the inauguration. And the first set of meetings that the new Secretary of State did was with the Quad foreign ministers, with the Indian foreign minister. So it's part of that a visit of the Vice President will allow high-level discussion to take place. Now, as you have indicated, there is going to be a certain amount of focus clearly in the entire India-US establishment on trade-related issues, because that's one of the difficulties, that's one of the areas where US has been putting some emphasis. But it's clear that both sides have been very seriously and with determination engaged in negotiations on this. The Indian Commerce Minister has visited US, the Assistant USTR has come to India, a senior Indian official is scheduled to visit the US later this week, and the negotiators have finalized the terms of reference between them. So this discussion is continuing. Now, while that is happening, clearly I think at the level of the Vice President and the Prime Minister, they will look at the broader relationship. What are the challenges the two countries are facing, where there is convergence in handling them? Some of those would relate to China's unilateral and assertive action. Also, how do you strengthen the military cooperation between the two countries? Because if you recall in the joint statement...
I was coming to just that, sir. I was coming to just that, sir, which is that there are two aspects which many believe may find more than just a mention in this meeting. One could be the shared concerns regarding the geopolitical dynamics that US operates in and also the India operates in when it comes to the Indo-Pacific. And also the fact that what about defense ties between India and US? And will that also translate into greater military purchases, something that US has been asking about for some time?
So in terms of the geopolitical dimension, the US has been signaling that despite all the ferment taking place globally, despite their changing the stance related to the European security architecture, working on trying to bring about some kind of a peaceful resolution of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. They're looking at issues in the West Asia somewhat differently from how the Biden administration had done. But at the same time, they're signaling that their focus on the Indo-Pacific, that remains. And they continue to see China as a challenge from there. So from that aspect, there is a certain amount of convergence in handling the challenge that is there. So that's one. As far as the military aspect is concerned, purchases are one aspect, but there is also the aspect related to co-development of technology and transfer of technology to India. So there again, there is some focus in the joint statement, for example. Both of them recognize that the earlier established mechanism of INDESEX, India-US Defense Acceleration Ecosystem, where the startups in defense technologies from both countries were brought together to try and work for co-development of technology, that has worked well. And they want to take that further. The US has authorized 80% technology transfer for G414. So those are the areas that would also be looked at, not just defense supplies.
Absolutely. Ambassador Singh, the other side I want to ask you is that if you were to look at it from Vice President Vance's side, this is his third international tour. Important because, he would want the right set of optics, which have been so far, unlike his other two visits, whether one talks about the Greenland one or the one in Europe. What do you think would be the takeaways or outcomes that the Vice President would be looking out for from this high-profile, important meeting?
So I think from the optics point of view, I think the visit to India will certainly be different from his earlier visits to Europe, where there had been some controversy. The visit to Greenland, where from all reports, none of the locals or the local leaders engaged with him during that visit, because they have a certain negative approach to how US has been articulating issues related to Greenland. But here, I think at the level of the leadership of the two governments, there is a certain comfortable way of dealing with each other. Despite differences on tariff, President Trump has spoken very warmly of our Prime Minister, his friendship with him. So that dimension is there. Vice President Vance had a meeting with the Prime Minister in Paris in February. So I think at the official level, there will be a signal that the leaders relate to each other well. They're discussing issues that matter. And then again, I think the visit to Jaipur, the visit to Agra, earlier today, the visit to Akshardham will signal that between India and the US, the people-to-people dimension of the relationship is very, very strong. And again, that is reflected in also the Vice President's own family.
Do you think, sir, that will be pressed upon further, given the concerns of the Indian American community, given the concerns about the students, H-1B holders, the techies? Do you think the soft power and also the people-to-people ties would be an area that the Vice President would also like to focus more on to assuage frayed nerves and concerns of India?
So I think that's an issue where there are different dimensions. So at one level, the immigration from India has certainly contributed to deepening of the India-US partnership. It has contributed to US strength in many areas. Many of the CEOs of major US companies are people of Indian origin who studied in India and moved over to the US. So they made tremendous contributions to technology development in the US, doctors, engineers, and in many other sectors. So that's recognized. But at the same time, today there is a certain political mood in the US related to immigration that has been built up. And so there are consequences. And we are seeing that a certain number of Indians were deported from the US. There's many students, their visa status has been revoked. So here at one level, any country has a sovereign right to decide on visas. But one would expect that people who've been given visas with a certain understanding, those purposes are fulfilled. If students have gone there, they should be able to complete their education. So I think these are the issues that the two governments would need perhaps to discuss in greater detail.
And finally, sir, before we wrap this up, how important or how significant do you think China could be in these talks? There's a position that US has taken, but the position as far as New Delhi is concerned, it's not only nuanced, but is also evolving as we speak. How much do you think China will figure in these talks?
So, China will certainly figure, but I don't think we should see the India-US relationship as predicated only around China. That's only one dimension, because there are a lot of strengths in the bilateral relationship. If you look at trade, US is our largest trading partner. India is among the top 10 trading partners of the US. US is the largest foreign investor in India. Indian companies have invested more than $40 billion in the US. At 5.2 million, US is the largest single country presence of Indian origin diaspora. And then you now have 1,800 global capability centers in India.
Absolutely.
Doing cutting-edge R&D and technology development work for the global operations of major corporations. So there are certain inherent strengths in the US-India relationship, and we should keep that in mind.
Absolutely, we should. And thank you so much, Ambassador Singh, for taking out the time and joining me on India Global. Viewers, before I welcome the other two guests, Dr. Raj Bhayani as well as Professor Arun Kumar, I want to quickly tell viewers joining in right now that Vice President JD Vance is inside Prime Minister's residence, the 7th Lok Kalyan Marg behind me. The meeting is just about to start. The visuals are on your screens. These are live visuals that we are playing out. This is the most important meeting today diplomatically. Remember, it's a semi-private trip of the Vice President and his family. Today is when he will be meeting the Prime Minister, who will also be hosting him for dinner after the meeting. Important because of the very dimensions it opens up and the many areas in which both US and India are looking to strengthen their cooperation. And on that note, let me quickly now rope in Dr. Bhayani as well as Professor Kumar. Professor Kumar, let me start with you. The sense one gets is that Trump 2.0, a lot of focus has been around these trade negotiations. The fact that India has the 90-day pause and the window to be able to thrash out a deal that is mutually agreeable and beneficial, how important do you think that is for the bilateral relationship to move on, evolve and grow into its many possibilities?
Thank you for having me. I think it's a very critical thing because, as was already pointed out, US is our largest trading partner, just ahead of China. We have a huge surplus with the US, whereas we have a deficit with other nations. We need to preserve that, otherwise our trade deficit would go up further. So how do we preserve that surplus that we have? Because President Trump is very transactional. He wants to reduce that deficit that the US has with us. And for that, he's pressing us on agriculture, on various other fronts where we have surpluses. And our agriculture is rather backward. under WTO, we got certain concessions because of which we were trading with the US. We could send our agriculture produce. But he's been accusing India
I
of.
was actually asking you another question, sir. You're making an important point, which is why there are divergences as far as the trade negotiations and how they need to be approached. My question was, sir, in this 90-day window, one is, of course, you lock the trade volume and you ensure that it's insulated from the broader trade tensions. But how important do you think the trade deal is to be able to unlock the potential of the bilateral relationship as a whole, not just in trade, but in other dimensions?
So for us, trade is very important. For the US, it is less important because the US has a much larger trade with other countries, especially with EU and China and so on. So in other words, we are the ones who are going to be pressed very hard by the US for concessions. Our capacity to press the US for concessions would be very limited. And therefore, in a sense, we have to be very careful about how the trade negotiations go. In fact, with the EU, we've been having trade negotiations for 23 years, haven't managed to fructify them. With the UK, we've had negotiations for the last 4 years. So it's a very tricky business. Whenever we've had bilateral and multilateral agreements, India has lost out. Here, we have to try and see how to preserve our trade, and especially in agriculture, because agriculture is very poor. And that's where, we are being pressed because...
Hold your thought there, sir. I'm going to come back to the agriculture part of it because it's important. You're right about it. Let me now rope in Dr. Bhayani on the other aspect to it. We spoke earlier about, and through this broadcast, and NDTV has been bringing you all the details, updates about the importance of this visit, also from the fact that the second lady comes from an Indian origin, Indian heritage, something that she's spoken about at length, something that her husband, that is the Vice President, has spoken about at length. How important do you think, Dr. Bhayani, this is in terms of building the trust and building the relationship on a bilateral level?
It is, thank you for being here, and it is absolutely very, very important symbolic gesture. The Indian community and diaspora in USA is very proud that the second lady is of Indian origin, and the Trump administration in the first term as well as the second term has shown tremendous warmth towards India. The Modi and Trump rapport has been phenomenal. I think we can build on that, and immediately after Trump took over, Modi ji was invited, and then after that our Tulsi Gabbard came to India. Now the Vice President is there, Elon Musk is on the way. So all these talks indicate that US has given India the topmost priority in its international relationship. And for us, all of us, that is very, very heartwarming as well as the moment of pride. Having said that,
Indeed.
At the same time, as you mentioned...
That's a very important aspect, sir.
Right. Yes. As you mentioned that this
I wanted to ask about the immigration part of it, given the concerns that are now coming in, whether it's the tech talent or whether it's students, how do you see those concerns being addressed, whether it is through these meetings or these meetings acting as a bridge in terms of building more trust to be able to address some of these concerns?
Absolutely. As the rapport develops and the bilateral relationship becomes warm, they will be more receptive to our suggestion. Americans know that Indian diaspora who is working here has contributed phenomenally to the America's growth. And our students have always been known to be smart. As you know, the Indian doctors, which I represent, are every seventh patient in America is treated by Indian doctor. That shows that American people know and understand that Indians have tremendous goodwill in America, and stopping them to come, it is going to hurt their universities. The student enrollment India is one of the top notch. Even it has surpassed China in the student enrollment in America. So I don't think they will assess and case by case basis, and India will be given the priority in the student visas. As far as the H-1B is concerned,
okay, fine.
As they will start making the priority of manufacturing USA, they will need the talent and they will have no option but to come to India, an Indian, our educated class.
That's an important and positive aspect, sir.
Yes.
Quick question,
Yes.
Professor Kumar, because I'm running out of time, which is the fact that in your assessment, what could be that one key takeaway that you would expect out of this meeting today?
Well, we need to really negotiate on agriculture because that's a very critical sector. 60% of the population depends on it. If we face high tariffs in the US on agriculture, we'll be in trouble. If we reduce the tariff in India on agriculture produced coming into India, our agriculture would be a huge problem. So I think we need to go back to the WTO agreement where because of the, we are a developing country, we need special concessions from the US, especially with regard to agriculture. We can buy more defense equipment.
Yes.
We can, have some negotiations on electronics and other items going to the US. But I think the critical thing would be agriculture. Once that agreement is reached, I think an overall agreement would be possible. And I think maybe the Prime Minister would try and negotiate that with the Vice President Vance, because that should be the key focus, as you ask.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Professor Kumar and Dr. Bihani, for joining me today on India Global on a story that has many ramifications. And bottom line, viewers, really is that while we cover this meeting very closely and the takeaways of this would be equally important, there are some long-term ramifications of these visits and visits like Vice President JD Vance's current visit right now, which is that India-US relationship is now sitting on 5 key pillars, not just 1, not 2, but 5, trade being one of them. But beyond trade, there is technology. There is also closer cooperation when it comes to terrorism, intelligence sharing frameworks. There is also greater alignment when it comes to geostrategic, geopolitical common goals and concerns, China being one of them. Later this year, the Quad Summit will happen in India, in New Delhi. Prime Minister Modi will host leaders of the 3 countries, including President Trump. And before that, this visit lays the groundwork for greater, closer strategic alignment on issues not just related to trade, but beyond that. On that note, shifting focus, viewers, to the other big international story that we've been tracking, which is Pope Francis's death. He died at the age of 88, a day after his in fact, on Easter Monday today, leaving a huge vacuum in the world and, of course, impacting the entire Christian world. This report tells you what happens next, the process of choosing the next Pope. Take a look. Choosing a new Pope is an elaborate affair. Once the last rites of the Pope is completed, the College of Cardinals is tasked with electing the new leader. The college consists of cardinals who are bishops and archbishops. In theory, any Roman Catholic man who has been baptized can be considered for election to become Pope. The cardinals, however, prefer to select one of their own. Voting happens inside a guarded environment, and the interaction of cardinals from the outer world is restricted to remove the chances of collusion of votes. A 2/3 majority has to be achieved. Currently, there are about 140 cardinals who are eligible to vote, with each cardinal voting through a ballot paper. No one can get inside the Sistine Chapel during this selection process. One gets to know the result through the smoke that comes out from the Vatican's rooftop. If a pope hasn't been chosen, the ballots will be burnt along with a chemical that makes the smoke black. White smoke indicates the selection of the new head of Roman Catholics. Within 30 to 60 minutes of the release of white smoke, the newly elected pope appears on the balcony overlooking the St. Peter's Square, signaling a new chapter in the history of the Vatican. Bureau Report for NDTV World. Well, viewers, with that, it's a wrap in this edition of India Global. Before we head into a commercial break, for viewers tuning in right now, well, the big news that we've been tracking, NDTV has been tracking, is the meeting between Vice President JD Vance and Prime Minister Modi that's still currently on. And we're going to keep getting you all the details, insights and perspective. So stay with us. We come back on that story and more after this very short break.